right, so I think Jeff stepped out for a minute, so I'll just step in and say this is Thiago. He's here to talk to us about Qt and KDE and open governance.
Okay.
You got it.
So thanks for having me. Quickly, who am I? I've been around the KDE community for a long time now, and you can see there. First contribution was back in 2001, so it's been almost 10 years now. I actually started hacking in KDE before, and I just made my changes and never actually got to send them upstream. I just made them for myself. I had made KDE 2.0 able to do IPv6, but since I never sent them upstream, I missed the chance, and I only got 2.2 to do IPv6. So this is also some interesting news. KDE has been ready for IPv6 for 10 years now. And it's weird when you talk to some other companies that are asking, so when are you going to be ready for IPv6? This is a discussion we had internally inside Nokia as well, when they were asking, so what do you need to make Qt ready for IPv6? What do you mean? We've been ready for 5 years. They just couldn't understand it. But yeah, this is the reason, by starting with KDE and doing some KDE hacking, this is the reason why I ended up at Trolltech at the time. I joined the company in 2006 and then again in 2007. I joined twice and transferred to Nokia with the acquisition in June 2008. My current position is that I'm Senior Product Manager. What does a product manager do? I basically talk to people. I try to understand what they want from us. Sometimes I have to tell them that they can't have it. Then I go back to the teams and trying to figure out how to get there. So past responsibilities included being the product manager for the core domain. So anything related to the strings, containers, the build system, everything like that was my responsibility. No longer the case. I'm focusing my time on open governance and the legal relationship. That's basically a full-time job each. So there's a lot of work to be done there. Like I said, I was a developer back then. I still do some hacking whenever I can. Enough that the technical lead in the core domain sometimes complains, why are you doing stuff without talking to us first? And I was also release manager, the person that gets the release out of the door. That's a lot of work there, but moved on since. I'm here to talk about then Qt and Open Governance. I divided my presentation in 3 parts. The first one is very quickly what it is. The second one I'm going to go show you, so what's the current status? And the third one, so what's the relation to KDE? So let's get started. I'm hoping that I can answer your questions. So let me get through the first part here, and then if you still have questions on what the open governance is, feel free to ask even then. What is it? It is really about opening up the way we develop Qt, transition development and the decision making into a more open method. We chose an open source project as the governance. So let's be clear here, we're talking about open governance, changing the way that Qt is governed. And the way we chose to do this is by mirroring and becoming more of an open source project. This applies to all of the Qt projects here. Currently, those are the ones there, the tools, creator, mobility. WebKit is much more advanced than the rest because they've been part of the WebKit community and that's how they develop. But in other aspects, they also need to do some more opening up. And I usually throw these 4 words around: fair, transparent, inclusive, and meritocratic. Those are the guiding principles behind our open governance project, but also around many, and most actually, open source projects. Trying to be fair to everybody. The decisions are transparent, so you can see what's happening. There's nothing behind closed doors. It's inclusive, meaning people are welcome to join, people can easily join. And meritocratic in the sense that you get to make decisions based on your skills, your contributions, your commitment to the project. Oops, wrong direction. What does it affect? Well, I could have just written everything, one big word, everything, but just listing the way we make contributions, the way we make roadmaps, the way we interact with people, so what websites, where do we store our contribution guidelines. The guidelines themselves are open for discussion. What tools we use, this is part of what we're going to discuss, and how we do research projects, how do we communicate them, how do we meet people, how do we, it's really about everything in there. The question that most people actually are not asking me, especially when I'm talking to other companies, is why is Nokia doing this? Why are you opening Mora? Why isn't this against your interest? Well, the answer is that it's not against our interest. This is happening, it's not really news. Qt has always been the path to opening up more and more. So if you look back, we started as just free, as a year. We had then an open source license. Then we added the GPL version 2. Then we added the GPL version 3. Then we actually opened up the repositories, and we added the LGPL. There was a point where you didn't even have daily snapshots of the code. Now we basically have every single change available to the public. This is the logical next step. Doesn't explain why Nokia is doing it, but it's not news. Why we're doing this is that because Qt is really growing faster than what we can or even should grow. You can't grow an organization too fast. It would lose its culture, it would lose its identity. The reason why that organization is great, you would lose if you grow too fast. More than that, we don't even want to, because there are many things that we don't want to be doing. Think about it, Qt is getting used in so many places these days that we really can't do everything. So if we can't do everything, and more importantly, we're asking people, asking these other companies, asking these other individuals to use Qt anyway, we need to give them a way of making sure that they can trust that their needs will be satisfied without having to depend on them. So in summary, it is because why we're doing this is because it's in our best interest that others use Qt, but don't depend on us doing everything for them. Very simply, this is it.
Give more to get more?
Yes. But again, the simple reason is that we don't want to do everything. We can't do everything that people want to do with Qt, so we are just letting people join in, do what they need, so it's useful for them. How it is being done? We launched the project actually at Academy 2010, right before it. I remember blogging on my way to Finland from Oslo. Until the end of the year last year, we had a very lengthy discussion phase, trying to figure out all the aspects, trying to figure out how this would work. Thing is, the discussion went well. We discussed a lot of things. We came to several conclusions, but now it needs to happen. So since the beginning of the year, we're in the implementation phase. You didn't see much happening because lost behind the scenes, setting up the work structures, who's doing what. We had to get some contractors to help us out because obviously everybody's busy. So all of these things happened the first quarter of the year. Now we are executing. I'm going to show you what's happening. This was just the how. So what is happening? Before I go into this, any questions relating to the concept of open governance? What it is, why we're doing this, anything not clear? Okay, so current status is that the Nokia leadership has confirmed this is going forward. So despite the announcements of February 11, this is going forward. Qt is strong. Qt will continue to be developed in the open, and we're continuing with the open governance. This came all the way from Stephen E. Bucklever. We have, out of the discussions from the past year and what we've done in the beginning of the year now, The major strokes are identified, defined, we know what it's going to be. So we know the workflow, how it's going to work, we know what the decision model is. We know more or less what the legal needs are. During the implementation phase, it's going to adapt a bit. I mean, we know things how they would look like, but until we actually implement them, it will be a bit different. We have selected a code review tool. That's the biggest central piece of the new open governance, the tool where people are going to be using to make the modifications. We're negotiating the hosting. This is not going to run on Nokia servers, this is going to be run somewhere else. And we are communicating. We are talking about it and explaining what it is. And this is why I'm here today.
Okay, can you go into more detail on that?
Yes.
Okay.
So timeline, we are there or here, depending on your point of view. So we have roadmapped what's going to happen. We have the tool selected, and we have the structure defined. Now it is really engaging the community. It is really showing up what we've done and start to make it public. So we're going to introduce the structure. We're going to introduce what we're the capabilities. As soon as we have, we'll show the hosting as well, and we're going to be communicating. The second half of the year, we're hoping that we're up and running. We're just going to adjust and really make sure that people understand and participate. So what's the workflow? What we've defined? Really open participation. It is what Qt developers have always wanted, and a note here, it's not exactly what KDE development has wanted. It's really what our engineers have wanted, and the culture is slightly different. So it's not going to be the same thing as what KDE has. It's really what our engineers have wanted. We want to work on patches. We want to be easily create them and send them for review. We want enforced peer reviewing. Absolutely no direct pushing for anybody. It's always reviewed. It's always guaranteed that another person can say no. In some cases, you can review your own work, but should be the exception. But absolutely no direct pushing, because the regression testing system has the final word. If you broke a test, your change doesn't go in. Simple as that. The approvals are distributed, meaning that I can make my own change, and I can send to my colleagues, I can send to Leo here and say, can you review this? And then I go home. I don't need to wait for him to have completed reviewing. So this interaction doesn't have to happen at real time. It's actually useful though if he tells me at the moment that I send, because it's fresh in my mind, hey, why don't you do that? It's useful to have it on real time, but it doesn't have to be. And more importantly, it's distributed. I don't have to be in the same room as him. I don't have to be working together with that person to have it reviewed. We want to have all the discussions in public mailing lists. That's clear. I don't need to explain why. This is talking to KDE developers here and the community. You all know why this is good. And also, no distinction based on employer. The only thing that happens there is a legal requirement. We still need the contribution license agreement for any contribution. So that's the only distinction. Everything else is really the same for everybody.
Question?
Yes?
Is the contribution license going to change from the Trolltech one, or is it going to?
The one that we had during Trolltech times, the contribution that we had before, was copyright assignment. That's completely different. We just want a license to your contribution. It's a real license. You retain your copyright. It's yours. We just want a license. And the reason, quite simply, there's the commercial licensing. So we must be able to relicense under the commercial terms. Now relicense to DGF, but that's the point. The tools we're going to use to support this, some of them are open source, we've already been using, Git, Gitorious, some of the others. Some of them aren't open source, so for example, we're using Jira for our bug tracking system. It's not an open source tool, but it's a very good tool. we're going to keep on using it. The CI system we have internally, it's not an open source system, it's a proprietary one as well. We found it worked best for us. There's no reason to change it. We are adding a couple of new tools, wikis for example, but also the code review tool we selected Gerrit. So in the morning, when Jeff was talking about why Gerrit didn't work for KDE, that's true. But the conditions are different for us. Gerrit is a good match for us.
Okay. So specifically I was talking about hosting the repositories with Gerrit. So you're talking about the review part of it.
We're talking about the review part.
Right.
Yes. So yes, you're right. For example, Gerrit doesn't have a way of creating your repositories and making sure that you can manage them, create, delete, pull, these kinds of things. No, it doesn't. What we really want here is the review part. So we analyzed a couple of other tools, other possibilities, including the review board. We found them lacking. All of them were lacking a bit here and there. I think it's my next slide. No, it wasn't. It's the other one, so sorry, I'm out of order now. Gerrit is the closest solution to what we wanted. We didn't restrict ourselves to open source, but it's an added benefit that it is. It's very good at reviewing code. It's a very good thing. Straight to the point and no frills. Very easy to use. But to the point that one of my co-workers said, it's so much to the point it's actually dumping the database on you. It supports the contribution license agreement, so it was one of the requirements, and it has approval rights. I'll get into the model in a second. And it also has an API for us to use when making our box, our user interface. It's not perfect. It's written in Java. We're all C++ developers, so we don't know anything about this. And it had two big missing features. It needed to be integrated with our CI system. We also found out that none of the other tools had the same capability either, so this is not a detriment. And it's missing the reviews of multiple commits. The one review tool that we found that actually supported this is Gitorious. And the reason they support it is because we asked them to. So they developed that interface based on our requirements, that's why it supports it. We're going to have to do them both. So we're actually going to contribute these missing features to Gerrit. I'm going to backtrack a bit now. No, the wrong direction. We're trying to solve the problems of merge requests. Who here has sent a merge request to Qt? Yeah? Okay, only two. So you know that it's not very easy. I'm listing here 4 problems that we have with the merge request system. One of them, the first one and the most important one, is actually that it's different workflow from what we have internally. That means A, we have never tried to optimize it because it's not our daily lives. And B, that we don't see the merge requests because it doesn't appear on our Facer every day. So this is one of the reasons why it's slow. The new system, the new workflow is defined to be the same for everybody. So like I said, it is one and the same for everybody. It doesn't matter who you're working for. You depended on Nokia people for approval. Again, all positions are open for everybody. An approver can be another person, or the colleague can be a Nokia, can be somebody else. Doesn't matter. So you don't depend on a Nokia person to approve your change. One of the other reasons why Nokia approvers didn't always approve was that they actually became responsible for your change after it got approved. So if your change broke a test, that person became responsible for fixing it. No longer the case. It's actually your responsibility now. So if you broke a test, it's your responsibility to go and fix it. More than that, if you broke a test, the system will automatically remove your change without what the current system does, which is that if you broke a test, it stays broken until somebody goes and fixes it. We're really doing the other way around. If it's broken, it gets backed out until a proper fix, a proper change with a fix goes in. And the final problem was the legal scanning required for every contribution, which introduced a delay in the best of the circumstances of a week. What we're doing right now is that we're proposing to the legal team, still to be confirmed, bulk scanning. This should improve the lead time.
How are you going about it? Have you decided yet?
How are we doing the bulk scanning?
Yes.
We have more or less decided it's basically that changes are accepted, go into the repository, and then every now and then the legal team will come and scan it.
So, but I mean, like, is there a specific tool that you're using for scanning, or is it in-house?
It's internal for Nokia. And this is really Nokia requirement and Nokia issue.
Okay.
The decision making, so the governance itself, it was inspired on the WebKit and the kernel models. So quick note here, why not the KDE model? Can anybody tell me what the KDE governance model is? None. It's really that anybody can make whatever they want. So we don't really want that. It's really good for KDE. We actually trust each other very much, and I love that. Unfortunately, that wouldn't work for us. There's just too much commercial interest behind this that could get tricky. So we're actually looking at two very successful open source projects which have commercial backing. The Linux kernel and WebKit. They're different from one another. One is really based on a social structure in the sense that there's Linux at the top, you trust a couple of people, those people trust other people, and so forth. That's how it scales. WebKit, on the other hand, is a much flatter structure. There's one central repository. A couple of people have access to it. A couple more people, a larger community, have the reviewer rights, meaning that you can say yes for change and it gets accepted. We want to have something in between. We want something where anybody can be a contributor. All you need to be a contributor is have the will and the skill to do it. You can be a contributor in the sense of giving comments, improving the code, participating in discussions, that's fine. Or you can submit code. It should be very easy to become an approver. The approver is simply the person who has the right to say yes to change. So if Jeff makes a change, okay, there you go. So Jeff makes a change, submits it, it gets into the system. Anybody who is an approver can be me, could be Leo, could be Javier in the back, and say, yes, this is good, and it goes in. And that's all. We could stop here. We could stop here in terms of how this works. The extra level that we have is actually the maintainer. What does the maintainer do? He's responsible. He's the person who is responsible for the quality and releasing of a specific module in Qt. We've come during the discussions to conclude that the maintainer is responsible for the code, that it is his responsibility to be always ready for beta. If you put a new feature in, the feature must have alpha stage. Must be ready for beta the next morning, for example. No regressions, documented, everything. And even the release machinery to make sure that new changes come in are his responsibility. He doesn't have to do everything. Now he can use his social network of trust to say, you know, I trust Wade to do this, so I don't have to worry if he's doing it, I'll just trust him. And then at the top we have that figure of the chief troll. He's really just like Linus, he's he's the most trusted person here, and if there's any stalemate, any discussions, any tie breaking that needs to be done, that's who is going to be doing it.
And who will be the chief troll?
We have an idea. I'd rather not say at this point. But the idea is that we're going to, how we're going to bootstrap this model. So you actually see that there are a couple of different colors of hats here. The idea is that we're going to bootstrap this model mostly by the current people that we have in our organization starting as approvers. We're going to select a couple of people to become maintainers. Maybe temporary basis, we don't know. We're going to ask a couple of people whom we already know on the externals to be maintainers, because that looks very interesting. And some others to be approvers, and then everybody else can start as contributors. And can become approver quite soon.
One maintainer per module? Are you talking
One
about-
maintainer per module.
So
But the
one-
definition
just
of
one guy
don't
allocated
think of
for
the
every-
module
Oh.
as the same thing as exactly as in the code.
Oh, alright.
Right, so the module is flexible.
What class?
Yes, one maintainer per class. No. We can also have sub-modules and subsystem maintainers. We can also have port maintainers. It is really flexible in the sense that if there's a need, so this is another point, maintainer only if needed. So there will be no creation of maintainer just because this company wants to help us and wants to have a say. No, no. There's no board. There's no. I want a position. Give me 2 seats. No, no such thing. A maintainer only exists if there's a need for it because of the code. So if you have a module that is too big for one person to maintain, split it, even if the code is the same. Split the responsibility. There are 2 maintainers.
So like WebKit be a module?
WebKit is a module, but the point is that they actually can do it. It's a huge module, but one maintainer can do it because they're actually pulling from the WebKit community and releasing the Qt modifications. An example of where it wouldn't work is actually Qt GUI. Because there's the widgets, there's graphics view, there's OpenGL, and there are a couple of more things going on inside, the event model. So all of these things are inside one library, and they're not exactly interconnected.
So how many maintainers do you expect to have at the beginning?
Around a dozen. Around a dozen.
And that's not very much. I mean, that means that
The point is that
a lot
let's
of
start.
responsibility.
Let's start and let's see how this
Yeah.
works. So probably what will happen, again, I'm emphasize on probably, is that we're going to select a couple of people, throw out a division, and let's give it 6 months to see if this works. If it's too much work, let's divide. If this person says, you know, I don't want this, I actually just want to be coding, I don't want to be responsible. I don't want QA to come back and tell me this isn't working. So we can change. So let's give it some time to settle down. We're going to throw out an idea, a division. Let's see if this works. It will require adjustment.
So how will this adjustment be done? I mean, in the end, somebody has to decide. If you say there's responsibility in the maintainers, you have to need
So how this is
some
going to work? My opinion is really that if you look at any given module, how many people do you have working on it? It's 20. A large module is 20 developers working on it, maybe 30. It's really naturally selecting whoever is doing the leading of it. So the maintainer is the person really who knows what everybody else is doing, who knows where the code is going, who is setting the direction, right? Making sure that things are happening, giving counsel, giving advice. So I expect really that maintainers appear naturally out of that group of people. We'll need to figure out together, and let me get back to that in a couple of slides.
Okay.
Just to finish this one off, there are the roles. There's a lot of work to be done. There's QA people. We are going to need the release. We're going to need people doing road mapping, thinking ahead of time, thinking of new features, talking to companies. That's my job actually. We're going to need people who are going to be doing some project management. Then there's community management, the websites and everything else. All of this is part of open governance. Face-to-face meetings works very well for KDE. And by the way, we're proud of sponsoring many of them because we know this works. people meeting face to face, you break the ice of the poor medium of communication, which is the email, right? And you get things done. I'm running short on time, actually. So we're going to have the first contributor summit in Berlin, middle of June. Objectives there are really to work together and plan the next 6 months, but also update the open government. So we're going to throw some ideas. Let's figure out together then how we're going to find if this maintainer is working or not, whether we divide or not. Let's do this together. But also what we want in these face-to-face meetings is also for engineers to come and say, this is what I'm working on, this is what I want to work on. Let me see if anybody else has the same ideas, let's work together. And whenever we talk about road mapping, meritocracy, again, it is not, I want you to do this, it is, I'm going to do that. Like I said, I'm running short on time. The 2 questions for Katie
You have
here.
10 minutes.
Huh?
You have 10 minutes.
Yes, I know. That's short on time.
Fair enough.
Because I imagine there are some other questions as well. The 2 questions for Katie here are, how can Katie help, and how can Katie benefit from this? So, if we start with how can Katie help, you can help both the code, you can help Qt, as you can help the process. You can help the open governance itself. So, focusing on the code part, you can, so individuals can come and add new features, maintain existing features, can fix bugs, write documentation, writing tests, reporting issues, can continue doing testing, they can provide test results, they can give you use cases, can give feedback on existing implementations, participate in API reviews, and the list goes on and on. There's a lot of work that can be done in terms of the development itself. I don't expect everybody to jump on it, of course, there's everybody's busy doing other things. But this is an area where you can start. And you can contribute to the process itself. I said before, we need community management. We need people who understand how this is going to work. The dynamics of a community. How do people interact with each other? Do we have a troublemaker who needs to receive a personal email and let him know that these are things going on? We're going to need people who teach our newcomers why this is good. Really teach the open source way. We believe in it, and we need people who are going to teach us. And by the way, this also applies to us, to Qt developers. Teach the open source way if you believe it. You have to go out and tell people why this is good. So Jim's presentation yesterday was showing how very good arguments for it. Let's bring it forward. So yeah, lots of activities, and these are just ideas. By all means, if you have more, do them. It's all welcome. And so what can open governance do for KDE? I had a couple of ideas. The whole KDE libs and Qt is actually on the next slide. So upstream modification, there's a lot of things that are already happening. Upstream features, and note here, this is not really offloading maintenance. If you want to put something in Qt, you have to be prepared to maintain it there. Participate, reuse some of the system as well. So when I wrote my abstract for here, I was thinking the tools we're developing are very interesting. Why doesn't KDE use it? I didn't know from the presentation that Jeff showed this morning that there was already something in the works for KDE. But you know, some of the modifications we're making, integration with the BOSS system, integration with the CI system, they could be useful and improve also the way the KDE itself is being done. We're going to have waiting lists to discuss on this. I expect many KDE developers to be just sitting there. They don't need to say anything, but sit there, learn what's going on. New features coming in. So there's this new thing called, there's a new language we're developing which is based on JavaScript, you know. Hey, let's figure this out. Maybe it's interesting for one of our projects. New mobility module. Maybe this is interesting new feature. Let's use it. Just give feedback. On the specific case of KDE libs, again, it's not just move the code. And more importantly as well, it doesn't make sense to have everything. I added this slide after we had the discussion beginning this morning because I actually wanted to preempt some of the discussion. This is much bigger than we can have here. We need to select which parts make sense to contribute. And for those parts that make sense, there needs to be a maintainer. And it's probably going to change a lot by the time it gets into KDE, so into Qt. Need to follow the naming convention, Qt. This needs to be documented. What we call the rule of 3, meaning that it needs to work on 3 different implementations to make sure that it's cross-platform. It needs to be tested in everything else. And the contribution license agreement, which unfortunately means that unless you're the only contributor to something in KDE Libs, taking the code and putting it into Qt is not going to work. It's technically going to be rewritten. We can figure out together how this is going to work. What I invite you actually is to come to Berlin and figure out together. So we're talking about how we can have parts of KDE be upstreamed inside Qt. Let's work together. Let's talk to the developers who are working on this. You can talk to me about my code, but I don't know 95% of the code, more of Qt. So I'm not the first person to talk about this. That event is the right venue, where the other developers are going to be present and are going to be available to discuss. Just like the Collaboration Summit starting tomorrow, this is an invitation event. It's not that, it's really that we want to make sure that communication is efficient. We have the right people, and we don't have any freeloaders who are just there to make trouble. We want people who are there for a reason, and actually expect that people in this room here do have a reason. Just tell us that so we can make sure that we have the right set of people to come. Meet the other people, influence, if you will, the direction, the vision of Qt. We're going to be discussing all of that always. And like I said as well, open governance will need some fixing before it's final. We want to be using open governance by the time we have the Contributor Summit. Some of the things are not going to be working properly. So let's take that opportunity to discuss it and improve it. So that's what I have to say. I've got just a couple more minutes for questions.
I have one question about the ownership. So I take it that Nokia will still be the owner of Qt, so it will still
No,
own the Qt
you have to be
trademark.
clear on what you mean by ownership.
So it will still
Ownership of what?
So it will own the trademark of Qt.
The trademark is Nokia's property, yes.
So it will the contribution agreement will have to be done with Nokia.
Yeah.
So Nokia
Can continue to have the commercial licensing, which is now a Digi operation, but yes.
Yeah. So I guess the infrastructure will be owned and run by Nokia.
No. We really even can't run the infrastructure ourselves. So we're actually looking for a hosting partner who's going to do this. We're going to be funding it, but other people could also fund it. The infrastructure is really open.
Yeah.
Aside from the trademark, there's really no ownership here. The code is LGPL. If anybody wants to take it and do something else, they can. If you don't want to participate in the way we're doing this, anybody can take it and take it elsewhere. But what we do want is that this community here is attractive, that people can come and work with us. That your needs can be met inside, that you don't have to fork.
I mean, in the end, ownership probably also means governance. So who in the end decides about the governance? I mean, of course, you have this bootstrap problem. You have to somehow create it and build it, and there will be some decisions which will just be taken. So who is the chief troll? Who are the initial maintainers, and so on. And I guess that there will be some structure coming out over the next couple of months.
There will be
how
some.
this works. But I'm thinking about if there really is a conflict or if there's no common direction, if there are really two different directions coming to that, then somebody has to take the final decision. So if I would contribute my 1 million line patch to add all of KDE libs to Qt. I mean that's probably something which will need some high-level decisions, which will need a lot of discussions and so on. How do you think will this be figured out?
Well, the reason is, I have some backup slides. Any decision needs to be made after clear guidance, right? So the worst case scenario is that both sides have reason. Right. But then both sides have reason, nobody's trying to pull any more than the other, we can come to an agreement. The decision making needs to be based on known rules. Known rules. So I divide into two categories here, really objectives and subjective checks. There's a vision for Qt. We know what Qt wants to be. It's a cross-platform toolkit, the best application toolkit for making applications. Currently, we want it to be the best application toolkit for device making as well. Out of that, we have goals. We have what we want to do in the next 6 months, in the next year, in the next 2 years. So if you're taking Qt in that direction, your change probably goes in. If you're taking it elsewhere, maybe not. And here really, how do we get the correct solution? Is this contribution taking it in the right direction? That's really what should be the reason. That's basically the only question. Is this contribution taking Qt in the right direction? These here are just declining it into more specific details.
With some conflicts in the past, I think, so for the Qt mobility stuff, for example, there were some heated discussions about if that's the right thing or not. So do you think this model will prevent that in the future? Or
I
have a
certainly
better
hope
way how
this
to
model prevents any kind of those discussions. And the reason why I think it will is because we are including the road mapping decisions here. So you're going to see early on what we as Nokia want to do. And you're going to see what any other company wants to do. You're not going to have, the model also prevents that somebody comes, hey, I've got 200,000 lines of code, we've been working for 6 months, now it goes in. No. Nobody can do that, not even Nokia. I have a 200,000 contribution here, 200,000 line. Let's work together to have it accepted. Here's why it's taking in the right direction. Here are the tests we've done. The 3 platforms or more we have tested. Let's do an API review together. But this should be really the exception, having a code drop. It should more in the sense be, we're planning on doing this. Here's the repository, follow us. So the case of mobility, if we had this in the past, you would have seen that for 9 months before it got announced, there was some work on sensors, some work on multimedia, some work on here, some work on there, creating a solution.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that will help a lot to make this more transparent. So that
It's really transparency needs to
attack
happen.
earlier.
So, out of time, I'm certain there are more questions. Feel free to talk to me. I'm here until the end of the week. Meet me in Berlin as well. I'm also back in San Francisco for the MIGO conference, and I'm going to be presenting the same subject, my favorite subject right now. So, feel free to talk to me when you see me, or send me an email. Thank you.